Okay.
Good. I have to switch over to my slides so I can operate them. All right. So these slides are actually from a complete webinar. So they're probably more than what we need for this purpose. But I just use them to illustrate some things which are a bit difficult to show on the actual machine. So I will skip some of the information, even some of the complete slides. If you feel bored, let me know. If you want me to concentrate on something a bit more, let me know as well. Right, so the first slide is just a very, very simplified graph of fingerprint development, just to show you where our products are actually settled. Obviously, regardless of whether you work with non-porous material or porous material. By the way, do you see my mouse moving?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you do, the first thing you always do is the kind of visual inspection or examination, using light sources, using possibly also camera-based systems. That's what we also do. So we have a light source system, we have camera systems for the laboratory, we have camera systems for the crime scene, combined systems, and so on. Obviously, we also use the same type of lighting systems then later on when we have chemically enhanced our fingerprints for the actual documentation of, let's say, developed cyanoacrylate developed fingerprints or anhydrine developed fingerprints and so on. And the very bottom, you see some of our photographic workstations, downdraft filter workstations for illumination. By the way, the same light sources that we use for the crime scene on a handle, we can also mount on a kind of a tripod system or like a copy stand system. We can remote control them and so on and so on. Mm-hmm. But for the actual development of fingerprints, there is a rough differentiation here into smooth porous and rough non-porous systems. Obviously, fingerprint powder treatment would be available for both, although I would more see them onto the non-porous systems, despite the fact that some of the textbooks say you can use it for both. The problem is a bit if you powder a piece of paper, that's it for any further development. So, right. On the porous side, we do, as Paul explained already, in anhydrine, indent dye and DFO development chambers, also 3 in size and a portable version. And if we go to the left, which is the core of today's presentation, is actually cyanoacrylate fuming. We do that, as you can see on the very left, in 3 different sizes as fuming chambers. We do also have a portable system called MEGAfume. Actually, the system is called MEGAfume, but we didn't dare to call it MEGAfume Mini. That sounds a bit stupid. So we called it the MEGAfume. So this is basically a cyanoacrylate fuming chamber in a box, in a wheeled trolley. Exactly the same type of controls, exactly the same safety, the same type of filtration and so on as you would have with the big laboratory-based systems. And the very bottom, you see a system that we call MEGAfume. That is for fuming fingerprints in a complete crime scene, like let's say an underground drug plant, which you find with heap loads of plastic sheets, tubing, cables, whatever. You don't want to carry all of that into the laboratory. You just want to fume the complete room because that's afterwards scrapped anyway. We also use them in fuming tents. So there is particular fuming tents if you want to put that over a car. Our tent is a bit different to what, for instance, Foster and Freeman uses it. Our tent consists of 2 halves, and you're actually moving them from left and right over the car, and then you join the 2 tents so you don't have to lift something over the car. Yes. And here in Germany, we have quite a number of forces that have so-called fuming rooms. That could be just something like the garage where they usually have their crime scene van parked in. And that's completely tiled all the way around, even the ceiling and everything is possible to be afterwards spray washed. But more forces do actually have half of our fuming tent permanently set up in a garage, having the MEGAfume permanently sent up there. So if they have something like a safe deposit box, or recently in Germany, quite a number of exploded ATM machines. So they have them on a pallet lifter, like a pallet mover thing. They are very heavy. You would never put them inside a fuming chamber. So they just wheel it into that tent, close the tent, fume it, and see what they get. Very often they don't get anything there, but on the odd occasion they find something on there. Stolen bicycles, motorbikes, anything that's too large or too complex to actually get into the third floor and into a fuming chamber, they like to use a MEGAfume system, even if it's not at the crime scene only. Right. So let's go into cyanoacrylate fuming. I don't have to explain you what cyanoacrylate is, so sorry for that slide. The only picture why I left that slide in is that one. We all know if you glue something with cyanoacrylate, the stuff never sticks on the plastic material you want to glue, but it sticks terribly on your fingers, right? To be honest, the purified cyanoacrylate we are using in forensics, that is perfect for medical purpose. This is the same stuff that a doctor would use if you have a cut in your forehead or something like this, to glue it. But it does not really adhere or stick very good to plastic material. So real superglue, Loctite or whatever brand you take, usually have other components in there to make them more liquid, to make them less liquid so they don't drop, to make them, like sneaking into the very, very fine capillary areas, and so on and so on. And interesting enough, we had one customer here in Germany where we kept commuting between him and us, because he said our cabinet was absolutely brilliant for the first month, and then it stopped developing contrast. So we went there, our service technician did a couple of runs, they were perfect, he left again. And that happened 4 or 5 times till we found out, always when we were there, they were using our cyanoacrylate, and always when we were not there, one of the colleagues was using an industrial glue, and that industrial glue had a transparent maker mixed into it. So if you glue something black plastic material, you would not see this whitish bloom coming out. So there was a transparent maker, and obviously it made also the fingerprints transparent. No wonder you had no contrast on there. So the problem is it sticks to your fingers, which is quite nice. That's the feature or the property of cyanoacrylate which we're using for fingerprint development. Disadvantage is it does not only stick to fingers, it does actually also stick to fuming cabinets, right? So this is just a couple of pictures that we have been taken at customer sites. So this is not anything staged. This is really, really old cabinets in different vendors, different manufacturers, in all sort of places where we have been going to. And when we designed our system, we said, look, in the beginning of cyanoacrylate fuming, it was all about keeping your cabinet clean. Meanwhile, all the accredited labs, at least, and everyone who is a qualified sub-supplier to an accredited lab, needs to also work DNA safe. So there should be no transfer from DNA from one case to another. So they are supposed to actually clean out all the DNA from the cabinet after every run, or at least once a day. Where you're not able to easily clean off cyanoacrylate, you will also not be able to easily clean off DNA. That's what we thought. So if you look to those cabinets, and I try to see my mouse again, apart from rubber seals in niches and so on, you would also have this kind of aluminum bar with what do you call that? Slits?
Yeah, rubber seals and slits, yeah.
Yeah, like where you usually put mounting brackets in and stuff like that. You'll have systems like locks that go inside the system that look like this one. You have free hanging cabling and wiring. And yes, you can clean that, but it's an awkward activity, and no one really likes to do that. So we said the absolute best would be a self-cleaning chamber, like having a kind of an integrated dishwasher in there. Unfortunately, that's not so easy. But we tried to make it as good as possible. So what we did is, if you look to our MEGAfume series, and that's valid for all the 3 sizes that we offer, we have an external steel frame, a very solid one, and we basically hang glass screens from inside from the let's say skeleton framework or whatever you want to call that. So they have this. I don't know whether you can see that. This bolt here, this is actually outside the chamber. So from the top there is a bolt hanging down, and we then mount a glass screen on the bottom of that bolt. And between the glass screens, all we have is silicone seals, very easy to clean. So that was one feature where we said all the way around, where we said that's brilliant. So that's basically 1, 2, 3, 4 sides that are made from glass plus the glass door. Everything absolutely smooth, no recesses, no free hanging cables or anything like that. But somehow we have to put shelving inside there. So what we came up with is, I'll show you that later. Sorry, I was too far. The bottom we didn't dare to make from glass. If someone lets something drop down and the glass smashes, then it's not so easy to clean anymore. So the bottom is actually made from a high-grade stainless steel. And as you can see on the upper picture, on the left side, that red thing, that's the hot plate. Absolutely even. There is no what you call that, no edge around it or anything like that. And it's made in a size that you can utilize any type of glue dishes that you have. We found most of our customers do want to use different type of glue dishes, just simply because that's what we have anyway in stock. Or some of them say, look, if I'm fuming something like Lumiciano or Policiano, I want it to have a larger surface, so the stuff actually fumes out a bit faster. Whereas if I'm going to use just standardized cyanoacrylate, that's fine in a very, very small dish. So I want to vary with that. So this is the reason why we made the hot plate rather big, and no framework around it, so only one type of dish fits in there or so. On the right side, on the upper picture, you see this kind of blue thing. There will be a picture where you see it much better. That's the water reservoir for the humidifier. And most of the accreditation documents do actually say you have to replace the water after every run. Why is that the case? When you fume cyanoacrylate, it sticks everywhere where you have humidity. And water is definitely humidity. So on the top of your water reservoir, you will have a kind of a layer with cyanoacrylate, and possibly also some dust from the evidence that's blown around. If you leave that in there and you use it for the next run, you're fuming out that stuff again, which means you probably distribute quite nicely and evenly the DNA from the case from the run before. So in most of the accredited labs we know, they say you have to swap out the water after every run. And if you have a fixed tank for that, that's rather difficult. So we made that little, let's call it like a cup, like a mug. We made that to easily come off. You see on the lower picture, this is just like a pin coming up. That is the heater. So we have the actual cup sitting on there. That's made from aluminum. We can't make it from stainless steel because stainless steel is a very bad thermal conductor. So it must be aluminum. We have coated it with anodizing coating, which hardly takes on any cyanoacrylate. So it's super easy to clean. Disadvantage is a bit, you shouldn't put it into the dishwasher because that takes off the anodizing. You then have a blank aluminum cup after, I don't know, 5 or 6 runs. It will still work, but it's a bit more difficult to clean. Then in the center, there will be, again, pictures where you see it a bit better, but in the center you see on the upper picture a fan. That's a circulation fan that moves the air inside the cabinet, and also that one can be just unplugged without any tools. And then you have basically an even surface all the way to the back, which is super easy to clean again. So that much about the constructive measures to make it more easy to clean the system. So again, this is the view of the system when we have emptied out everything. In the back, you see actually a kind of like a slot where we put the filter in the end. The filter cassette is typically a fully encapsulated cassette with a dust filter inside, so it doesn't blow out activated carbon into your chamber. There is a second option, which I show you in the next couple of slides. There is a bit more detailed picture. For the moment, I just talk about this full cassette. So this cassette does actually then go into that kind of slot in the back. And the only thing you have to make sure is that you have the direction correctly, because the dust filter is located on the bottom side. And if you rotate it wrong, in the wrong way, then the dust filter actually keeps your cyanoacrylate away from the activated carbon rather than the activated carbon from the cabinet. Pretty simple to just slid in, and then on top of that we have a cover. The reason for that cover is when we did run our first prototype with a customer in real life, he said, okay, I'm going all in. I will run a real case on your cabinet straight for the first run. But for that, I have to do a DNA decontamination. And most of our labs here are using peroxide solution, so between 8 and 12% solution. So he basically had like a spray pump, and he was spraying everything inside with this peroxide. And he sprayed so much that everything was running down on the walls and dropped down from the ceiling and so on. So if you bring peroxide into your activated carbon, and then later on a blowout, actually distribute that peroxide across your evidence, that's the perfect way to eliminate all the DNA on your evidence, which you probably don't want. So for that reason, we have kind of a cover baffle that comes on top of it. The advantage too is you can also put something on there, absolutely easy. So it protects the filter a bit from having stuff sprayed in or spilled in or dropping in. And then in the front, and for visibility reasons, I have made this from a black sprayed air guiding baffle, because that's normally also stainless steel. But on the picture, stainless steel on stainless steel is very bad contrast, so you hardly see anything. So this one is just what you see now in black would actually also be stainless steel. So in the front, you first put kind of a baffle there, and then you fix it with the actual fan unit. And from the side, it looks then like this one. And how does it work? The fan does actually pull air from behind and then blows it upwards. And because you might actually have evidence straight above your fan, we don't want to have all the humidity or all the glue going directly onto that system. We actually have this air guiding baffle in there, which creates the airstream to climb up the front screen and then create kind of a roll inside the chamber. That is the pin I was speaking about, and this is just the kind of water tank you put then on top of that. Interesting or different to most of the other humidifier systems is that pin that you see there can not only heat, it can also cool. So that means if we're going to heat up water to create humidity, it takes a while before the water is hot enough to evaporate. And then after a while, our sensor inside the chamber will say, okay, I'm close to my set point, so I'm probably approaching the 80% humidity. Please stop humidifying. If you then switch off the humidifier only, the water in that pot is still hot and will still for a certain time evaporate out of the pot. And therefore, in order to stop that immediately or to stop that faster, that pin can not only heat, it can also cool. Right, so this is the setup of the system when you just, before you do your fuming. You see on the right side you have this with the distilled water for the humidification. On the left side you see a glue dish where you put your glue in. And then you simply go. Now about more constructive stuff, I'll show you that live as well, but I think in the slides you see it a bit better, is we have these supports on the sides where you put later on our shelves in. And these supports and the shelves are all made from electropolished stainless steel complex word. I hope that travels. Stainless steel would travel. I think that's the right term. Electropolishing is a method to create a extremely smooth surface on stainless steel, which makes it more difficult for the cyanoacrylate to actually stick onto it and makes it more easy for the user to actually clean it off. So this is not only stainless steel, this is a specially treated stainless steel. It basically makes a very, very hard surface, and the electropolishing does actually move the chromium that's inside stainless steel to the surface, creating a very, very blank, very shiny, and very, very smooth surface. Right, so you can easily remove them. We have in that size system, we have actually got 1, 2, 3 layers in the center and one in the very top. Each of them you can actually put these kind of side rails in and then put weather standard shelves in. I'll show you them in a minute. You can leave obviously off what you don't need, so you don't have to clean it. But we also have special racks like for cups, for mugs, for anything with which you can put on a pin like a gun. I don't know, drinking cans, whatever you want there. We also have special racks for long shaft rifles, for instance, or baseball bats or anything like that. So it doesn't actually sit on the ground, on the floor of the system. Very flexible, and you just simply, as I said, you simply put in what you need, and what you don't need you leave out, with the result you don't have to clean it all the time. So this is the system as you see it here, and I'm going into the details in a minute. You have a plug on the side with an integrated power supply. One thing we didn't like with, I won't tell names, but one of the vendors we sold before was this external power supply, which was a very, very noisy thing, permanently running in the lab. We said we want that to be silent, so our system, when it's in standby or when it's operating, it doesn't make any noise. So this is just where you put standard 230 volts in there. You have a opening button on the handle that's illuminated as well, showing you the status. You prepare your system with the distilled water and with the cyanoacrylate glue dish. And in the back panel, you have this kind of assembly where you see two of these kind of, let's call it knobs. There's a white one and a black one. The white one is actually the pre-calibrated, temperature compensated humidity sensor. It does also measure the temperature inside the chamber, which in our areas, and including yours, most of the time that will not be an issue at all. But if you, let's say you would run the system here at the moment in a cellar that's not heated, the system would detect whether you're actually below the temperature where cyanoacrylate fuming would work. Likewise, if you operate the system somewhere in Malaysia and you have a non-air conditioned room, if you are above a certain temperature, cyanoacrylate polymerization would also not work. So the system would also tell you, you're above the temperature, please make sure you have the right conditions for fuming. That black thing on the right of the white knob is actually a socket for our UVC unit, covered, and then when you use it, you just unscrew it and plug in your UVC units. By the way, our UVC units are identical whether you use it in an anhydrous chamber or whether you use it in that one. It's the same thing. You can just alternate it between the two systems you have. Right, going into the display, that is how the display looks. I'll do that live in a second. What we have already made some experience with from our anhydrous chambers is this kind of pre-programmed cycles, which you have here on the left. You have a number of pre-programmable cycles. For instance, we have named them here cyanoacrylate 1, cyanoacrylate 2, polycyano, lumicyano, and there is a custom one as well. And then obviously there would also be a manual, which you don't see there at the moment, I think. Or is that the manual one? Can't read. Yeah, that's the manual. Meanwhile, there is another one which is user definable. by name. So what's the purpose of having pre-programmed cycles? In the accredited labs, one of the topics about accreditation is to have your processes standardized in operation. So not by mistake or by forgetting something, you're going to run your sample with the wrong parameters. So this is why we say a experienced user or a supervisor, or however you want to define them, they can set up a cycle, and a cycle for us consists of various parameters, which you see in one of the next pictures, and then he can save that and show the public user can then just simply use the cabinet by using any of the buttons you see there on the left side. In the center, you see all the processing data. At the moment, a lot of it is blanked out, but when you are inside a cycle, you will actually always have displayed the current humidity in the chamber, the current temperature in the chamber. Always below in that bracket where you at the moment just have the dashes, that would be displaying the set points where we want to go. And then the last column, that's the timer. It will tell you how long is this step supposed to do. And then above, you will see a counter counting backwards. On the right side, you see a button for the door to be opened. So independent of the button on the door handle, you can also use that on the display. Then you can switch on and off the light. The very moment you're going to connect the UVC unit, that button below, the NAX, will actually become active. And then you have also a button that's called info. And depending on where you are inside the cabinet, if you don't know what to do, you press that info button and you get a bit of a help displayed. Depending on where you are, this is obviously different type of help. I can show you that live later on as well. Then the most important button on the screen is the stop button. At any time, you can press the stop button and say stop where we are at the moment. The system will obviously ask you whether you are sure to stop it now, because you might actually just have touched it by accident. But when you confirm, yes, I am sure, you can automatically, it stops the process. If you have been in a step that is before the actual cyanoacrylate fuming, you can simply open the cabinet and say, oh, I forgot a colleague inside on my mobile phone or whatever. You can directly open it. If you have already started the fuming process, so not the humidification, but the actual fuming of glue, then the system will have to go through the purge cycle and clean the air before you can safely open it. If we go further, in bit right of the center, you see a button that's settings. That's where you program the individual steps. And you have to be a, let's call it a supervisor or a super user to be able to save the settings then. You can easily go in there, everyone can go in there to see what the parameters are. But in order to change it, you have to use a password. And then left of that one, you see an icon that says filter saturation. Now, this is probably the biggest difference to what the systems at the time when we developed it did do in the market. Everyone was just counting cycles. Now, what is a cycle? If I go to the equivalent, I guess the system that you have in your lab, if I go into the manual of that one, it will probably say something like, this cabinet is good to be used with a amount of cyanoacrylate between 0.3 grams and 5 grams. I think, if I recall correctly, that's approximately what they can do. Now, very, very seldom you will actually fume 5 grams. I mean, this is way over the top. But for security reasons, they said, okay, let's make it 5 grams. 0.3 grams for that size is probably a bit below what you should do. But in a university where you want to show some experiences where you say, okay, what happens if you have too little glue in there and so on, it could happen that you work with that one. Typically, I would say for that cabinet we were talking about, which is a bit bigger than that one, I would say somewhere between 0.5 and 0.8 grams is a good thing. The cycle counter will, though, have to consider the worst case scenario. So it will count back based on the 5 grams you put in there. So if you, let's do a calculation. I'm really bad in counting in my brain. So if we say we usually use 0.5 grams, but the counter is actually working with 5 gram, that means in theory, I could do approximately 10 times the runs and still would not oversaturate the filter. So that's the one disadvantage we found. The second one was more and more people were using fluorescent, one-step fluorescent cyanoacrylates, whether it be Policyano, Lumiciano, Pekka, whatever name you take. But we found out that all these fluorescent cyanoacrylates do saturate the filter substantially more than the standard clear cyanoacrylate. And in result, you will have to actually calculate your worst case scenario, not only by the maximum amount, but also by the worst of these chemicals that you're using. And we consider, for instance, Lumiciano to be one of the, and Policyano to be those which saturate the filter most. And if you then use the maximum amount of that one, that means it's probably way more than 10 times that you could use in your filter. So we said this is stupid, and in sense of not throwing away, creating waste and throwing away half-saturated filters, we want to change that. So in our system, we are actually going to tell the cabinet what type of glue are we using and how much of that are we using for the run. And then in result, the system will calculate, okay, this run then represents, let's say, 0.7% of saturation. And then it simply counts up. When it comes to 90%, that field changes the color into red, and you get a display saying, oh, you're at 90% saturation, make sure you have some replacement in-house or something like this. And when you come to 95%, I think it gets a bit more dominant and says, you better look now for a replacement, I'm due soon. And then once you are at 100%, the system completely blocks the usage. You can't use it anymore with a saturated filter before you replace the filter. Right, that's about the filter saturation. So these are the different cycles we can do. Depending on what type of glue you use, you can pre-program that to use it in a standardized way. Obviously, the manual, you can adjust whatever you want. Now, about the actual setting of it, if you go into the settings menu, that is approximately the picture you would get. You now see on the left side, you see one of these buttons being illuminated in red. So whatever you select, it goes red and says, I'm programming now that particular button. In the center, you have this kind of parameter programming, and you can adjust the humidity, you can adjust the temperature for gluing, you can adjust the glue time. And the second from the left is a saturation time. So that's approximately what the hold time with your MVC would be. Yeah. And then on the very right, you do actually see where is it? You do see a save button. And if you press that button, the system will prompt you to type in a PIN. So only one who has that super user PIN can actually change the settings, which I think in a university is probably not a bad idea. Still, you probably want someone to be able to work with varying parameters. So if you don't have the super user PIN, you can still use it, but only once. That means you run that once, and when next morning, when you boot it up again, or just after that run has been done, the next colleague that comes back and uses it is still at the standard parameter settings. So you don't have to make sure, oh, everyone is resetting everything to the correct level and whatever. So it automatically, with the next run, it goes back to standard parameters. All right. So when you run the system, this is how the screen then appears. You will see in the top, you will see what program you selected. You will then see step for step in which stage of the process the system is at the moment. And you see in the center with the process data, you see at the moment it should go to 80% humidity. It is right now at 54%. The hot plate is not active at the moment, so you have 28 degrees Celsius on there. It shall go to 120 degrees later. And for that step, we allow 20 minutes, and it was counting at that moment at 1945. There's one field that came new in the actual process, which is down here. So apart from just switching on the light on and off, our light is actually in the four corners. We have LED stripes down all the length of each of the corners. And we can activate or deactivate them individually. Sometimes, let's say you do a plastic film or a drinking glass or something, it is quite good for monitoring the development if you have the light coming from behind and not from four sides. So you might actually want to be able to switch off the front lights or the right lights or the left lights or the back lights, whatever you think is best for that particular sample. And then the system goes step for step for step, it goes through, and in the end, it will actually come to the finish step. Oops, I forgot something. 1 second, sorry. I have to go back. If you decide I have to interrupt my cycle, like for instance, I left my mobile phone inside there or a colleague that I still need, you press the stop button and you will get this prompt saying, are you sure you want to do that? And as I said, you can directly open the cabinet if you have not been in the fuming cycle. If you have been in the fuming cycle, it will go to purge automatically. And then after the purge, it goes to the finish mode. Now, that's also something new that that was not present with the cabinets when we started the development. Probably meanwhile it is. We have a so-called storage or preservation mode, we call that. Let's consider you have been fuming in an automatic mode. You're not in the room, and your activated carbon filter has absorbed the 80% humidity into the filter. Now the fuming has finished and the system says, okay, I'm done, ready, beep, blink, I'm ready. If you don't do anything now, if your system is actually switching off and you don't come back for an hour or two, what can happen is the humidity that's saved or stored inside your activated carbon filter can easily evaporate out of the filter again. And then you expose your sample, which is supposed to dry pretty fast. You expose that to undefined, uncontrolled humidity, which definitely slows down the hardening of the evidence, but could actually even blur it if the humidity becomes too much. So what we do is we go into our preservation mode till the user comes back, and preservation mode means our fan is permanently spinning with between 5 and 10% of the actual power. So just to make a little bit of an underpressure into the filter, so nothing can come out of the filter. Secondly, we monitor the humidity. So should you have an exhibit that is exposing humidity, like a brilliant example, a motorcycle helmet. You have a hard plastic outside, and inside you have a lot of foam that can absorb humidity. And when you have that humidity inside the helmet, and then you switch off the cabinet, obviously the helmet will give away the humidity at a certain point. And so it could create excess humidity, and your fingerprint on the surface could, in theory, blur. So we monitor the humidity, and if it goes above a certain level, the filter kicks on again, full speed, and is actually going to absorb the humidity into the filter. So it's lowering again, and when it goes below a certain level of humidity, it switches off the filter again. So that's the preservation mode. So the system is really, or the process is really only finished when you as a user come back and say, stop, I'm finished now. That's probably also a bit of a difference to what we do. On the display, you see, probably very bad on that picture, but below the display there is a USB port, and our controller inside does have a integrated protocol logger. So every run is actually completely logged. With every 30 seconds it records the time, the date, the program you selected, the set points of temperature, humidity, the actual values of temperature and humidity. It monitors the filter saturation and it just stays in there. There's a massive SSD hard disk drive in there. It stays there unless you need it. And if you need it, you put a USB pen drive in there, and the system then says, do you want to download the files, blah, blah. So you extract that from your cabinet, and there's a small PC program called Data Analyzer where you can graphically display the results. Looks a bit like this one. The software does then automatically recognize in the system, oh, which of the steps was that? Was that the humidification step or cycle? Was that the fuming cycle or the purge cycle? You can see, probably not on that picture, but there will be graphs for the temperature and for the humidity, so you can actually monitor everything. You can give it a unique number for the cycle. You can type in comments, whatever. So this is kind of quality data, and quite nice for illustrating graphically what's going on there. Most of our customers do not actually do that with every cycle, but they leave the information on there, probably pull it off once a month or so and put it onto their quality data server. And in case the law court has stupid questions or an auditor wants to know how do you record your quality data, this is the way how they do it. They don't have to do anything. The system is just doing it automatically. And if you don't utilize this data, forget about it. It's still there. That much about the data logger. Can't remember what that one was. We do that live on the system in a second, so I don't have to go into that one. Okay, filter replacement. When you have to replace the filter, you have to take off this cover, and then you lift out the complete cassette, and you put a new cassette in there, put the cover on again, and then you have to tell the system that you replaced the filter. There is a kind of safety feature in there. We're actually measuring the pressure above and below the cassette, and by this we can kind of guess the saturation. So if your students are going to reset and reset and reset and not replace the filter, after a certain time the system will say, do you want to trick me? That's not possible. I should have actually more air throughput on the new filter. So there is some safety, but obviously in order to be accurate, you will have to tell the system, I have just replaced the filter now. You do that by going into the settings menu. So you press that button, and the system, then below there is a button that says settings. And when you go there, you need your PIN again. And when you have your PIN, then there is a menu where you can say reset the filter and further stuff, which I will show you in a second. There's other options you can adjust, but only if you have a PIN. And then automatically the counter goes from whatever it was down to 0 again. Now, talking about the filter replacement, as I said, this is the standard filter which we developed and which we have been distributing and supplying for quite some time. We had a lot of customers that loved it because they said, we don't want to have something to refill and the dusty work and whatever. We want a fully encapsulated system, so a cassette that we can just lift out and place in. There is no mistakes to be made, just very easy to handle. Others said, oh yeah, but I think it's a bit of a waste of resources to actually always throw away this stainless steel housing around it. And for them, we came up with a second solution, which the user can choose from. So there is a kind of a carrier cage made from stainless steel. You would have to buy once. And then into that carrier cage, we do have always a package, a set that consists of a dust filter, which you put into the bottom of that. And then a little sachet where we have activated carbon already inside, enclosed in a sachet. Obviously, it could dust a bit, and therefore you have the dust fleece in there. And then when you have to install that, all you do is you place first your dust filter in the bottom of that cage, and then you place your sachet in there, and you have to even it a bit, and in result, that's how the replacement unit then looks like. And you place that one into that slot instead of the filter cassette. That refill solution, how we call it, is actually a bit more expensive till run number 3. And from run number 4 on, you actually save a lot of money because the refill package is approximately between half and 2/3 of the price of a cassette. So it takes a while before you break even price-wise, but then from a certain time on, it really gets more economic and environmental friendly if you want so. I do that live, so allow me to skip that slide. As I said, there is 3 different sizes available. The 2 smaller ones have the same footprint, so they just vary in height. And we had one customer who said he wants the larger one, so the mid-size one, but he wants them without the wheeled base. He wants to put them onto a bench, which is also possible. We can actually produce that with just legs on it and a bit less high, but still on a typical 80 or 90 centimeter bench, the uppermost level is pretty high up. So you have to have tall students then for that one. But he wanted it like that, so we created it. The large one is a little bit designed a little bit different. It has a two-winged door, so you don't need so much space in front, and the opening is approximately a meter, so pretty easy to access. And that's basically the program. So what I will do now is I switch to the camera and show you some stuff on the actual machine. Where is my... So what it does, it tests, are the fans working? Is my filter sensor correct? Is there enough airflow? So several steps to go through there. So you have the pre-programmable cycles on the left side. You have the opening button and the illumination on off here. And then this one is disabled at the moment. That's the DNA cycle. That enables the very moment you put the UVC unit in. You see my filter does have 24% saturation at the moment. And if I would like to program the system now, I'm going into the settings menu, and you see there is the various buttons which I can select from. So I can select whatever I want to program. Let's say we do the first one. You have the humidity, the saturation time, the temperature for fuming, and the time for the fuming. The time for the purge is obviously given by us, because we have to make sure the air is clean enough, really. So the first thing you do is you set your parameters. And when I saw this field first, I told my R&D guy, I can't operate that. My fingers are way too big to actually adjust that fine enough here. So that's really, really tricky. And he looked at me and said, "You're not an Apple man, are you?" Because apparently with Apple, all these dials work like you pull out the actual dial, and then you can very super fine adjust. Oops. Yeah, you can super fine adjust in a bigger radius, whatever you think you should actually do. So once you have adjusted all of that one, you tell the system what type of glue you have. Obviously, this cycle is called cyanoacrylate, so it's standard cyanoacrylate. You can't select there. On some of the others, you can select whether it's polycyano, lumicyano, PECA, standard cyanoacrylate, and so on, or a user-definable. And then you tell the system here how much of that glue you usually take for that cycle. That is the factory default. We say 0.8 grams are okay for that cabinet size. That's the standard we do. If you say I want less or I want more, that's no problem. You're just going to adjust that to, I can't see where I am. Sorry, I have to go behind the camera for a second. So I can easily adjust that to a higher level or to a lower level. And if I want to save it, the system asks me for the pin. If I don't have the pin, what I can still do is I can use this button once. So that says you are able only to use that once, and after you have been using it, it goes back to the standard settings. And I think, especially for a university, that's probably a very clever way of doing it, so your students don't misadjust everything on there. Okay, I say no for the moment. There would be further options like filter management and system. I do that in a second. So when you want to operate the system, then in the end, all you do is you press that button, and the system says at the moment, are you stupid? You haven't opened the cabinet since you started. Do you really want to fume nothing in there? So it detected, okay, I have to first open it, put some evidence inside, and then close the system again. And now it should do what it's supposed to do. So the first thing is it will say, I'm going to humidify. You see it should go to 80% humidity, and it is at the moment at 38. So it will heat up that water and so step for step go through there. And here on the side you see these 4 buttons. I think they look on the screen, they look very pale, right? Anyway, so you can, each of the lights you can individually switch on or off however you want that, whatever you want to create as a light scenario in there. Should I decide I want to stop it, I just press the button stop. The system asks me whether I'm 100% sure I want to stop, and if I say yes, the system just stops. Would I have been already in the glue cycle, it would do a purge before I can open it. Back to the settings menu. If I have replaced my filter, the system asks me, are you sure? This is a bit dangerous. If you do something wrong there, you must be authorized. So it asks me for the PIN. The factory default is 1, 2, 3, 4. And when you do that, you actually go into a menu where you could select what glue you have been using on there or what parameters you're using there. But more important here at this point is the reset of the filter. And that's a good example for the info button. If you go into the info button, it does actually have a step-for-step explanation of how you replace the stuff. So lift this one, take that one out, and so it's actually going to explain you exactly on the display how you're going to replace your filter. Similar to the filter replacement, there is a systems menu, which you can also as a user access with a pin 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 4. And then you get into a menu where you can adjust various things. For instance, the language. So you can actually also switch to French, to Italian, to Polish, to German, to whatever you want to. Then there is a button that says door secured. We have a couple of customers that say not everyone can actually open the chamber without having a pin. In the US, there is a couple of forces. They say when they have, for instance, weapons in there or anything that is of value, you have to have a pin to be able to open it. In Germany, we never need that because for us, the laboratory doors are actually secured. No one that's not authorized can actually enter the laboratory. But different countries, different rules. Then we have a standby function. You can tell the system after how many minutes it shall go into standby, and then what standby does mean. Standby here in my setup would mean the system is switching off the lights, the system is disabling the display in the front, and every fan or anything else is disabled, apart from the mini cleaning cycles that it does, which is then adjusted here, how often and how long they have done. So after, for instance, 20 minutes, the system sleeps in, and just a simple touch of the display would wake it up again. Very simple. And then what we also have is a option. Oh yeah, we have an option to say how shall the system indicate that it is actually finished. We have an optical alert, which is the lights inside the chamber flashing. Well, flashing is probably a bit over the top. It's actually like 1 second on, 1 second off, 1 second on, 1 second off. So it's not really a flash. And there is also an acoustic alert, like just a beep that you hear clearly. And so you can define which of that or which combination of that you really want at the end of the cycle. We can define for how long a typical UV cycle shall be active. And then there is a button that says more, where we can adjust the time. But more important here is some of the forces say we use our chambers very, very seldom, so probably once every 2 weeks or so. So if they are at 90% saturation of their filter, that means for another half year they would get their warning messages during every run. And they want to disable these warning messages, so you can disable the warning message for saturation. On top of that, we have a second counter in there, which is the lifetime counting. Most of the health and safety people say activated carbon filters have to be replaced after minimum or maximum 1 year. For two reasons. A, the activated carbon does actually lose its capability after a certain time by reacting to the environmental air. And secondly, because you expose it to humidity, there is the risk of what you call that germ buildup. Is that the right mold and germ? Could actually build up when you expose it to humidity. So they say after 1 year you have to replace it. But not everyone does that. So we also have the warning message for that one to be activated or deactivated. After 11 months it would come up. And then the red one here is for those who say, I don't want that lifetime counting at all. It will still, inside for us internally, it would still count, but it would not disable the system after strict 12 months. But this is something you can only access when you have the supervisor pin. You can't do that as a student or just as a standard operator. That much about the actual system itself. And I'm going to move the cabinet a little bit back so I can open the door in front of the camera. 1 second, please. That should work. If I open the system, that doesn't work. I have to lift the camera for a second. 1 second, sorry. Okay, should work now. So if I look into the actual cabinet, this is my grills. They're made from stainless steel and not typical barbecue shelves where you would have lots of cross poles, because for cleaning that's a nightmare. So we get them actually made especially for us with only 3 of those crossbars. And then on the sides, these are the side support rails, which you can easily take off. So in the end, when you clean it, that's a smooth surface. The only thing that's a bit disturbing is this kind of knob that comes out. But if you want to clean that one, don't tell my R&D guys. And don't take them out, all of them at the same time, because then the glass will fall into the chamber. But you can actually take that off so you have a smooth surface, and then later on you screw that in again. All of that material, also the shelves are made in material and in size, so they fit into a laboratory dishwasher. So you don't have to manually clean that stuff. You just put it into a lab dishwasher and get it cleaned automatically. There is enough in the cabinet that you have to clean. Let me take out my machine gun. I have a blow-up machine gun because at exhibitions it doesn't really come across very well if I put a real one in. So I have this blow-up thing, and then one customer at an exhibition came across and said, oh, that's very stupid. Who would fume a blow-up machine gun? Yeah, okay. Okie doke. That's one of the special racks, which sits in the bottom to put on long shaft rifles, for instance. And you have then in the upper part here, in the upper part here, you have the cross, the counterpart for it. And also that one is the pin support system with very strong ones here for heavy stuff and a bit more light ones for that one. What I wanted to show you is the stuff on the bottom here. So the first thing we take out is the fan. This is the fan block, and as you can see, that's not a new one. That has approximately 100, maybe 200 fumings done already. And it's what do you call it? Like a fan from the server technology. So it's made for running 24/7 permanently, not a cheapish PC fan. But it's made in a way like this is supposed to be let's call it a wearable or a replaceable. So after 3-4 years, you probably just want to throw away that one and put a new one in. Or if you have technical skills enough, you take those 4 screws off and you mount your fan in there yourself and a new one, because the plastic material around it, the housing, that's obviously still working. Then on the right side here, that is the glue dish. No, sorry, the humidifier tank. So this is made from anodized aluminum, and also that one is not a new one. That has many fumings done, and it's, as long as you don't put it into the dishwasher, it really is easy to clean. And then in the end, you see my air guiding baffle. Also, that one is polished, electro-polished stainless steel. That's not even cleaned. That's directly after some fumings. You can probably see a bit of that residue on there. And again, that one also goes into my dishwasher. I don't have a lap dishwasher. I use the standard dishwasher in our canteen for that. Just a very hot program. Works quite nicely. And then that's the type of dishes we use. But you can use whatever you think. And then in the end, this one here in the back, this is the baffle that comes out, and now you see the actual cassette. And if I want to replace the cassette, that is my cassette. That's how it comes. And the only thing you have to remember is to put it with the pointer downwards. And what you also shouldn't do is, there is these handles, don't cut them off. We had a couple of customers that when they received it, they thought it's kind of labeling and cut that off. And yeah, you can easily put it in then, but on the way out, it's a bit more tricky in the end because you will have to take anything like pliers or so to go below there. But that one is just, what do you call that? It's not pressed. They call it baked activated carbon. So this is kind of a material like, not really a brick. You could actually easily, in your hands, you could easily make it into little small particles, but it's actually, it's stable. It's one solid thing. And in the bottom, you do have a dust fleece, so nothing comes out of it. So this is the standard solution that we supplied for ages with the system. And then I'm going to show you the replacement solution. So the first thing you need for the replacement solution is that one. That's the filter carrier. That's made again from a very solid electro-polished stainless steel material. That one can also go into the dishwasher if you want to make it clean. And then in the package for the replacement, you find kind of a dust fleece that you place in there. And then in the end, you have this kind of sachet. This is just in a plastic bag now because it will make my hands dirty. So I didn't remove it out of there. But inside, it's not loose material. It's actually sewed into a sachet, like a nylon cover thing. And all you do is, oops, let me just do it like there. You have to place it in there and then even it out flat. And then you place the complete solution in like that one. So that's the alternative. In the back, you have the sensor. Oops, I have to move the camera so you see the sensor actually. I might zoom in a bit more. I can't zoom in, so I have to move the camera. So in the corner, you have the sensor, and that sensor is removable. So you can actually just take it out. That's the complete thing. Should a sensor be damaged at some point or be completely off, all you have to do is you actually buy one of those. You get them by post and you put them in there. And they're already pre-calibrated. If you need a fine calibration, you will have to call Paul, and he comes around with a truck full of measuring equipment and will calibrate it for you. And then in the end, on the very right side, you have a kind of a covered plug where you can put in your UV units. Actually, I forgot them in the other room, but I can. Paul, when you take over, I run and get the UVC unit. Good. Okay, so this is the actual manual, and you see that is universal for MEGAfume, MEGAfume, Ninja.
Yeah.
And it does actually tell you how you access the program and so on. For instance, that's the screen then. Now let me zoom in a bit. That's the screen that you would get displayed, where you can label the stuff on the side. You can put in trend lines and so on and so on. You can zoom in, zoom out. You can select what type of machine it was. You can even type in the serial number should you have multiple of your systems, and so on and so on. And so let me just pull down a bit. You can mark an area and say that was so and so many minutes, and the average temperature in there was this, and the average humidity was like that. And then depending on the different type of equipment, I just scroll through. That's, for instance, a picture from MEGAfume.
Yeah.
So what you see there is you always have the set point. That's, for instance, the set point for the, I have to look closer. The blue line is the set point for the humidity. And then this blue ribbon around it, that is the tolerance we allow for the process. And then this blue line here, that's the actual temperature. I don't know whether you see that really on the, on the screen. I go a bit closer. So you see that is how it's then dotted, and you see how accurate that stays, and then it goes into the perch, and you see how fast the humidity goes down then there. That red one is the equivalent for the temperature. And if you would move over here, you can actually zoom in just on the temperature. If you move over and use the mouse wheel, you can zoom in and out on the humidity. You can shift it left and right and whatever. You can mark an area. It will tell you how many minutes that was, what's the average in there, and so on and so on. So the system does also automatically detect which is the humidifying cycle, which is the fuming cycle, and what's the cleaning cycle. Do I have anything else? Well, I forgot. What else did I want to show you? That's, for instance, for the Ninja. There must be a section where it says how you can actually transfer that out. So in that display, you're able to kind of mark and note and whatever certain things. Now for exports, you have different options. One option would be to actually just export that picture as a picture. You can export the complete thing as a JPEG, but you can also export that directly into Word. So there is different options of how you export the stuff. There is no need to export it as XY because the original data is already Excel usable XY data. So if your students want to do any analysis of things, they can directly, it's a text file, just not called TXT in the end, but it's basically a text file, and you can easily access those. And we would even provide you with the information which column does mean what. So your students could easily use the raw data and analyze whatever they think should be analyzed.